discuss how Likkle ideas are transformed into big dreams. The toolkit, and you will access a lot of resources. A lot of the information that we presented here today, there are a lot of activity sheets, so we encourage you to download some of that information. Also, there's a digital swag bag with Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to another edition of Likkle Byte Ideas. We're delighted to have you joining us today, and it's going to be an exciting show. Sit back, relax. We're going to be talking about agriculture and farming and talking a bit about our heritage. It's it is Black History Month. So we are focused on our history, which primarily in Antigua and Barbuda is Black history. And so let me get my co-host in here today, ASAP, because we don't want to waste a minute. Let me invite Megan Samuel Fields, the CEO of Samuel Fields Consulting Group. Megan, how are you today?
Hey, Dorit. I am well. How are you?
Doing great. Really excited about today's show. It's going to take us back to our childhood.
Absolutely, taking us back, and it's so appropriate. Black History Month. Yeah,
fantastic.
I'm all excited.
Well, the ancestors will be proud. We can say that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So let me get our guests introduced. First, we have Clement Samuel.
Hey, Clement.
Hello. Clement, of course, is our brother, our older brother.
Older brother. We gotta focus on that. Older. Just gotta focus on that. Let's make sure that they know he's older.
Right. Well, he is a dedicated gardener. Of course, he is also a lawyer and an engineer, but his passion, if he was born in another life, I think he would be a gardener. He probably,
is a gardener in this life. He is a gardener in this life.
Well, I think exclusively. That's what I mean.
Okay.
He would have been exclusively, the law and the engineering probably would never even surface.
Gotcha.
Yep. So he's a dedicated gardener. He is big on preserving time-honored techniques while embracing innovation as it relates to agriculture. So we're going to hear a lot about that today, and he's going to take us back to our roots, and we'll recognize that what's old is new again. So we look forward to seeing his personal garden. He'll connect it with some of our childhood memories and our family legacy. But let me bring the next generation in, Genesis Whitlock.
Hey,
and
Genesis.
Jen is a climate justice advocate. This agricultural thing is in her genes. I don't think she even realized it until she got much older. But, she's a climate justice advocate, shaping a sustainable future through the wisdom of the past. So Jen is pretty young, looking to graduate, but she's an old soul. A lot of the ancestors, I believe, use her as a vessel because she's really passionate about agriculture and some of the traditions and heritage associated with it. So today we have second and third generation landowners, and we're going to explore how heritage farming is more than just growing food. It's about cultivating resilience, prosperity, and sustainability for generations to come. Now, Clement, why don't we start with you? I didn't mention it, but our Body Pond Estate has been in our family for, 80 years maybe?
Yeah, 70 odd. Yeah, almost 80 years.
80 years, okay.
Wow.
We'll round it up.
I never stopped to think about that. Wow, it's a lot of years.
It's a lot of years, a few generations.
Right.
So tell us a bit about Body Pond, the estate, and Body Pond 2, which is your personal estate. So the family estate, and we want to talk about your personal estate and the connection.
All right. Body Pond, a Body Pond estate, is a 210 estate in the south.
210 acre.
210 acre estate, more or less in the middle of the country, in what still is part of what we call the volcanic belt. Very, very rich soil. And it is unique from the point of view that it is located where a lot of the water in Antigua traverses this area. And in years gone by, centuries gone by, it was known to be very, very fertile. Of course, during the, I think, 17th, 18th century, Body Pond, like I suppose most of Antigua, was dedicated mainly to the sugarcane industry. But especially after slavery was abolished in 1834, and labor was not quite as well, was not cheap anymore. Yeah, it actually had a cost. And also because you had the fluctuating cost of sugar and that sort of thing. And then later on, you had the Antigua being run by a syndicate who were prioritizing plantations which are probably more accessible. They built a locomotive line, what we call the local lines, to transport cane to the central sugar factory, because you got to remember before 1904, sugar was decentralized, and you had all these sugar mills across the island producing sugar. Now, that was very inefficient. And so just at the turn of the 20th century, we had a centralized factory installed at Guntrops. And certain farms or certain estates were prioritized, and it became even more difficult to cultivate cane at a reasonable cost in Body Pond, because those of us who know Body Pond knows it's not flat. The local lines did not pass anywhere near the estate. So even though your yield per acre would probably be very good, you would then still have the added cost that you would have to burden to take that to the sugar factory.
That's very interesting.
So basically what you have is, people like my grandfather, my great uncle, the people who invested and purchased Body Pond, they were farmers and entrepreneurs at heart and had to find a way to make this estate pay for itself. And so there are many stories we grew up with the amount of food and fruits that were in Body Pond. And I still think that there is very much potential there, and obviously other similar parts of Antigua. But without sounding too controversial, I think over the last 60 or 70 years, we have focused all our attention primarily on tourism, sun, sea, sand. And I think we have got to realize at some point that we've got to get back to basics, which is we've got to learn to feed ourselves and then find ways of using the technology that's been passed down to us. And I would use the word technology in that, many people think that in yesteryear, they were not quite as smart as we are today. I see you smiling, Jen. But in many ways, I think they were more methodical. The information that they gathered, they passed it on. And it's only now in this, in the last 50 years, we've somehow gotten away from our own history. And, everything now is imported. And I think there's a potential for us to go back to the land. We may never be able to produce, what we consume, but certainly I think we could reduce our food bill, and we can create other industries that augment the tourism industry. And I think in many ways we can find other industries that we don't realize are out there. And at the end of the day, what we really want is to make sure that when we leave this earth, we leave it at least in the same condition that we met it. And we should actually try to make it just a little bit better, just for the generations that come.
Okay, right. Well, thank you for that intro. I have a question, Clem. When you were talking, I don't think I ever made the connection that the sugar factory represented another phase of the sugar industry, because it was a centralized kind of production as opposed to the windmills.
Yes.
So after slavery was abolished, because during slavery we were still in the windmill, decentralized, using that kind of approach. To what extent was the abolition of slavery and the whole, scarcity of labor and a whole retooling of the industry, to what extent did that maybe prompt centralized sugar production? Is there any connection?
I think there is a little bit of a connection, but I think that, what we would have to look at are more macroeconomic factors. At the end of the day, Antigua is 108 square miles. If you include Barbuda, it's 170. And you've got to realize that in other countries, even as near as, let's say, Guyana, they would be able to replicate what we have here and have estates.
Economies of scale, easily.
Economies of scale. And so I think, and the price of sugar would have been, would have been determined on a global scale. Mm-hmm. So I think the pressures were on the sugar growers here to find ways of being more efficient. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways of being more efficient was centralizing, right, using modern technology, mm-hmm, finding better ways of transporting the cut sugar cane to the factory. And of course, everybody would be doing this for the best economic benefit. Mm-hmm. And I think, unfortunately, there are some parts of Antigua, possibly because of terrain, where it just was not economically feasible to do all of these, have the local lines run there. And I think also a determining factor was where the syndicate had interest. So Body Pond has always been in private hands. It has never been part of the syndicate group.
Very interesting.
Before it was owned by the Samuel family, it was owned by the Harneys, and they go back, I think, to somewhere in the 1930s. So you can almost say that it was at least at least 100 years in private hands, had great things going for it, but possibly, what it didn't have going for it was its location and its proximity to the sugar factory.
Okay, let's get Genesis in here a little bit. And Genesis, you spent your earlier years in Antigua. I don't know how often you went to Body Pond. I was reminding Clement that your elementary school once did a field trip to Body Pond, and he actually was a tour guide. He doesn't remember. But I reminded him that, that was a very exciting time for you and your classmates. So now that you are, you're an agricultural science, I wouldn't say major, but you are definitely into it. Give us a little bit of your perspective of Body Pond from a third generation landowner. You've traveled the world and you've seen, done some travel, and you've looked at agriculture and other systems. Give us kind of the global perspective in terms of how you see Body Pond. We'll come back to Clement, but I want to, we're going to toggle kind of like the past and the future. So let's hear from you, because this is a show about finances. At some point, we're going to get into the economics of this, the dollars and cents. So tell us a bit about your perspective on body pond from a global next generation type of perspective, and the opportunities. What are we sitting on here?
Right. So I think about the term ecological wealth, and I just love that idea, especially in the context of thinking about the future, what we're facing as an island. One of the biggest challenges is climate change. And I knew this very young because, I mean, thinking about how Hurricane Irma impacted Barbuda in 2017, I was, I think, 13 or 14 at the time. And then that summer, I went back to Antigua to visit grandma and to reconnect with family. And grandma had been, I think she had taken in a few family members of people who were impacted by the hurricane from the island, from Barbuda. And a lot of what she focused on was growing food. And she had expanded not only to her garden, but she started also, I'm sure she had already been doing this, but when I came back to the island around 13, 14, I got to see Uncle Clement, and we got to go through another tour of Body Pond. That was really fun. And grandma had also taken me around the island to meet gardeners who I just remember being so fascinated. Like, how do you know the names of these plants? How do you remember what this plant is for and its medicinal properties? Like, it's nothing. Like, you have a catalog of like hundreds of plants in your brain. And so, yeah, when Uncle Clement talks about technology and thinking of valuable assets, I think the ability to be in such close relationship with these plants that have, again, medicinal value, ecosystemic value, those ideas are just things that I remember at 13, 14, I remember being like, I want to be somebody who can look at a vast of green and not just see green, but be able to recognize specific species, and not just species, but to recognize stories and recognize the importance of what I'm looking at. And so for some background, I study environmental science and economics at school. I remember telling my auntie Megan that I was planning on studying that a few years later. And I remember her asking, well, why do you want to do that? I don't see the connection yet. And I said, well, from what I understand, every economy depends on the environment, and every environment right now depends on our economy. The ability to protect the environment relies on our policies. It relies on our ability to have strong economies. And so it was important for me to get an understanding of these two green subjects that are really interconnected to each other. And I'm grateful that I have, because it's led me to learning about food, where our food system, and again, we can talk about from, I know I'm not the most fun because I love to use the word, I still do. When you talk about the colonialism of of the background, I haven't left it. I don't know why, but since 14 years old, I've been fascinated with Antigua's colonial history. And I think a huge part of it has to do with the way I was raised, the history of Body Pond. It's hard to let go of it. And when we think about the role that colonialism played in shaping our identity as Caribbean people, I think we often neglect to think about how colonialism has also shaped our connection to the environment, and particularly within our soil health. I was reading a study last year about how the sugar industry actually impacted soil across the Caribbean, but this study focused on Antigua in particular. And when we think about the concept of repairing harm from colonialism, people think about dollar amounts and how are we going to quantify that? Whereas for me, I'm thinking about how do we ensure that this harm doesn't happen again? What are the things that we can't put a dollar amount on? And so I think things like soil and recognizing, I love what Uncle Clement just said about sand, sea, or sand, sun, and sea. And I wonder what it would mean for us as a society to reintegrate. Yes, we have the sand, we have the sun, we have the sea, but we have the soil, and not seeing that soil as dirt, but seeing the soil as a living ecosystem, as a really valuable community asset.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's just a little bit of background. And From studying environmental science, I've been able to travel to many amazing countries where these conversations are happening all over the world about reclaiming assets that we may have been taught to undervalue for whatever reason. I like to say colonialism, but I recognize it's much more complex. And at the same time, it's so simple, the value of being able to be with your family and eat food, and for you to be able to produce that food, know that that food will be accessible and available to you. These are some ideas of climate justice that I think are really important to me. And again, I've been really blessed to travel to the Amazon rainforest. I recently got a chance to attend an international climate conference in Azerbaijan. And what everyone is talking about when they say the word like climate and climate finance, all these emerging topics, what we're really after is life. That's all climate is. It's the ability to have the freedom to sustain life. And so when I think about what life means in Antigua, yes, we're struggling with so many issues, complex issues, but I think it's really important for us to think about what's most important. And I think food has been such an undervalued piece in the conversation. So I'm really grateful to be on the other end, about to graduate and putting all the pieces together. I'm getting my degree in environmental science and economics, but what I'm really walking away with is a really strong vision for the role that I can play in honoring all of this generational knowledge, using my nuffness, to the best of my ability. And I'm really grateful that we can all come together and have this kind of conversation. So I'll leave it at that, and thank you.
I like the nuffness part.
Yeah, well, certain things call for nuffness,
Yeah.
Certain roles, certain tasks, certain projects. If you're not enough, you get nowhere. So nuffness has its role to play, and you just have to know how to leverage it. But Clem, let's get back to you, because Body Pond has impacted you in such a way. I mean, I think of all of us, you spent a tremendous amount of time. Your summers were spent in Antigua. You spent more time with the grandparents than we did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Being a boy. So your connections with Body Pond, run deep, to the extent that when you built your property, I don't know at what point did you name it Body Pond 2, but tell us about how that
exactly
influenced. Huh?
I remember when you named it.
Yeah, so tell us about how the estate, the family estate, influenced the personal estate.
All right. So as you would have said, for those who know us, we came back to Antigua in 1972. I was probably 8+. And that was the time I really started interacting with my grandparents and spending holidays there. I mean, all of us spent Sundays there for sure.
Clem,
I think.
Can I just stop you?
Uh-huh.
You cannot not mention the farm that we were promised.
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
Okay, so that was the carrot.
That was our introduction to Body Pond.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, because we visited when we were younger, but I think Daddy painted this picture that we were going to build a nice farm on Body Pond, so we could not wait to relocate.
We were going to have all the things that we didn't have.
Antigua.
In Barbados, we lived a very urban life, and we could not imagine that we had this amount of land, we had these fruits, everything that you wanted in terms of fruits, vegetables, that sort of stuff in Barbados you bought. When you came to Antigua and there was Body Pond, you just picked. There was no restriction. So I think that was certainly something that we were geared up for. But I also think that because I was introduced to Body Pond just before I was 9, it was something that I never took for granted, because at 9, I was cognizant, if I'd grown up with Body Pond, possibly there all my life, it would just seem normal. But at 9, it was like, wow. And of course, at 9, you're hearing all the stories from Papa, from Tommy Pigott, from daddy, from the uncles, and you're trying to put all of it together, and you're sort of like, wow, you're trying to imagine this place. So Body Pond has always been a place for me where I go back to when I want peace, when I want comfort, when I want to be alone, when I want to reflect. And I, grew up, went to school, went off to study, and I never thought that I had inherited any gardening genes or any intrinsic love. So when I built and had my own home early 1990s, one of the things that I wanted was I always wanted a very nice home. But you wanted fruits because that's what you're accustomed to. I always say to persons, I'm a mango lover. Not, I'm not going to think I'm like Megan or like mommy or daddy, right? But I like mangoes. But I like my mangoes fresh. I've got to pick them, right?
And
I like
hard.
my oranges. Yeah, and hard. Yeah, I like my oranges fresh, right? Everything from Body Pond, I like picking them myself. And so I came to Fitch's Creek. I wanted, I think, maybe a horticultural garden with all the prettiness and all the flowers and whatever. But after a while, you wanted fruits and that sort of thing. So it was a learning process for me. And I have always been a person that I go back and I listen to people who have more knowledge than me. And so I would go back. I remember it was this old man. I do not think he was literate, right? I do not think he was. His name was Mr. Richards, but he helped me when I built my property and was helping me with some gardening. And, he said to me, look, we need to take some coconut trees from Body Pond and plant them here. And I said, people say that they won't come. He says, no, look, I tell you, anything can come. Mm-hmm. And it was me learning from him, right, intellectually, right, or academically. We're not on the same level. But certainly the reverse was true when it came to the garden. I was the one who was the illiterate, and he was the one who had a vast amount of knowledge. And as I went on, and the garden started looking healthier and healthier, everybody would come up and they would say, wow, you've inherited your grandfather and your grandmother's genes. And people started saying, up here is like Body Pond, it's so fruitful. And so somewhere, I think about 20 years ago, I think it was just after, I think it was probably when we were in law school, Megan, somewhere around then, it came to me, I know the name I want to name my property. And it was Body Pond 2, TOO, and not Body Pond, not a second Body Pond, but it was Body Pond also. And it just stuck. And once I created that name, I wanted to incorporate more and more of the things of my childhood, of what Body Pond represents to our family. Because I'm going to take a little bit of digression here, is that Body Pond is just not about the soil. Body Pond for the Samuel family is an ethos, an aspiration. It is, my grandfather, his father died at 8 years old, right? Raised by his grandmother, great-grandmother. He recalls to us that his great-grandmother was a slave. He knew her. He knew what poverty was like, right? But he also knew what working hard was. And can you imagine in 1949, a person without great means, right? He was not a rich man, but he and a couple of buddies, one of them was his brother, right? Had the vision, right? That we are going to acquire this estate, right?
And he was 30 years old.
Well, no, he was 40. He was 40, just going on 41.
Oh, that's right, 40. Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
His brother was 32. So relatively young people, right? Today, we would call them entrepreneurs. risk takers, right? I don't think that these guys didn't know those terms, but they recognized an opportunity when they saw it, and they were trying, and it was an ambition, and they were trying to secure generational wealth for the persons that followed, right? Because, Papa always said, we're not that far from slavery, right? You do your best, because there are many people who came before you who did not have that opportunity. And I think that has always stayed with me. And so when I started developing my own property here in Fitch's Creek, Body Pond 2, it was this desire that whatever I'm doing is not quite good enough, right? It has to be something where when people come in, it's a wow, how have you done this? And I've always used the stuff that I'll use all the knowledge that I gained from my ancestors, my peers. But I also think as well, with the internet and technology being the way it is so much easier to get information. So there's almost no excuse, right, for us forgetting some of the techniques, some of the methods that were used. The other stuff that I also want to point out, because I was asked recently, well, Clement, you've been into gardening, but you've only started being vocal, in the last few weeks. And what I say to persons is, look, I had 2 experiences in 2024, which were, I want to think, life-changing. And both of them happened within 2 weeks of each other. One was visiting Ghana, visiting the motherland, and seeing that colonial period and that slavery period from different eyes, and recognizing that the way I had looked on slavery prior to last year was basically from a colonial view and from what we'd been taught. Then when I got to Ghana and I saw they had a lot of oral history and they had a different perspective. And I also learned, which I'd never thought about, you thought that these people were slaves, they came over, our ancestors came across as slaves, and you sort of think that they didn't come across with any skills. And nothing could be further from the truth, right? A lot of these people that came over were skilled people, right? Mm-hmm. The colonialists, right, didn't know how to grow, right? They needed people who understood the land to come here.
Very interesting.
Yeah, but history doesn't tell you that part of it. Mm-hmm. Right? So I think that coming back and realizing that some of that was not documented from that point of view made me aware and made me want to say, hey, look, I've got to tell a little bit of the stories that I know, because I can hopefully connect with. The other stuff was I went to the Dominican Republic for the first time about a week after I got back from Ghana. And I'd always heard these stories of long lost family that had gone to the Dominican Republic, and I'd never fully understood the story. But since I was going there, I tried to investigate. I was able to find some of my relatives, some of Mom's first cousins. One was 100, another one was 99. And again, when I thought about it, it was a fascinating story. Again, linked to sugar, right? Because most of the migration was because at the turn of the century, so turn of the 20th century, so early 1900s, many of the estates in the Dominican Republic were purchased by Americans. The Americans went there, they couldn't speak Spanish, and they wanted workers that they could converse with. So they let it be known that they would pay highly for English-speaking workers to come there and cut cane. And of course, economics as it was at the time, people traveled there. Similar situation. They were building the Panama Canal, and vast amount of our people went there, had families. and lost connections. All right. So I came back and I said, all these are really great stories. But unless I document, then I run the very risk that has happened before, in that this story does not get told. And so
the connections are going to be lost.
I started the new year and says, look, let me start by telling my story about my garden. And hopefully if I tell the story about my garden, I can show people what my gardening philosophy is, where it came from, and what has led me to this point. And it's early days yet, but there's been a great interest. And certainly...
You've been doing an amazing job weaving those stories together and making, those important reconnections for sure.
Yeah.
So, so that's basically what it is. So again, the story that I did last week, or a piece that I did last week on the slave tombstones.
We're going to come back to that, Clem.
We have some pictures as well.
Yes. Megan, let's get some pictures up of Body Pond too. In the meantime, Genesis, let me give you a quick moment to share with folks. You had the most amazing experience where you got a chance to go to the rainforest in Peru. When people think of the rainforest, in fact, before you went, when I think of rainforest, I just thought about, Brazil, not recognizing that the rainforest runs through several countries in South America. You had an opportunity to spend, 120 days in the rainforest as a student. Tell us what connections. I'm sure there was a Body Pond influence, but share with us any connections that you may have made between that experience, your childhood experience with Body Pond, and what Body Pond can now become.
Yeah, absolutely. So I went to the Peruvian Amazon before I turned 20. I think I was 19. And again, the nuffness. I said, I knew since I was a child, I've always wanted to live in the rainforest, the Amazon. I don't know why I had that dream, but I definitely think the feeling that I got in Body Pond, I'm not saying it's the Amazon rainforest, but it feels, I think that ecosystem is so valuable. I don't know anything like it in Antigua. And so in studying environmental science and wanting to learn more about that Latin American Caribbean connection, I wanted to learn to speak more Spanish. That's how I was able to go there. And I think some of the main takeaways in the Amazon is this idea of agroforestry. And that's something that Uncle Clement introduced me to as well. When I told him, I was like, I want to become a farmer. I want to do this Body Pond stuff. And I remember him being like, do you even know how to plant? Like, do you know how to graft? And so he showed me, his process of grafting. Was it mangoes, Uncle Clement? I'm not sure if you remember.
It was probably ear laying on maybe some horticultural plants. I think that was what I remember it was that I showed you.
Yeah. And so I think in doing that, I was like, okay, I need to get some farming experience. So I got some through school. But another thing that I did when I was in the Amazon to get that Spanish experience is I just worked with the chefs and the gardeners to be able to practice my Spanish. And so I was like the student manager on the garden. And so, to be able to learn Spanish, I would be like, ¿cuántos los hojas? Like just asking, clarifying, what does this mean? What does this feel? And so I was able to gain more vocabulary. But I think I've always similarly had such a close connection to my elders. And there was someone there I really connected to called San Antonio. And he was a Christian. And so we would talk about our connection to God, our connection to the garden, and our connection to food. And every Sunday, we would pick cassava from the garden and then make, fry them up alongside some plantain. And he also got like coconut meat for me sometimes. Like I became one of his favorites because a lot of these students, it was a study abroad program, were American. And for me, they pulled out noni and I said, oh, I know this. It smells really bad. Or to me, I know exactly what this is. And I was so surprised that so many of the plants in the Amazon rainforest were ones that I grew up with. So it helped me clarify. I wonder if this is why I had this connection to it. And so because I knew what these plants were and how to cook them and how to cook them and how to prepare them properly, a lot of my professors and people on the estate were very surprised. And I don't know, I still think about that experience a lot. I think I got very close to God through spending over 100 days in the Amazon. I didn't have cell service. I didn't have a lot of these basic necessities that I, clung to. And I really just had a close connection to the land. And so in doing that, I felt strong. I felt like if I can do this for 100 days, then what's stopping me from going back to Antigua? And so, I did the agricultural component part of it, but I was also there for research. And there was a subject that I got really fascinated with, and it's called political ecology. And so it's where you study the environment, you study how different plants are growing and why, but then you also study the cultural piece. You work with indigenous communities to understand traditional knowledge and how important traditional knowledge is as it relates to them coping with disasters. When I was in the rainforest, we went through this huge flood. Everyone had to evacuate. It was really terrifying. But there were many people in the community who had networks in place. They knew exactly where to go, how to cope. And things like that make me think, again, as Antigua and Barbuda continue to experience climate impacts, I don't want to, feed into a disaster kind of mentality, but how do we feed into a community-based resilient mentality? We acknowledge that, we're a small island, we're very vulnerable, but we have a lot of what we need. We may not be have as large of an economy as Peru, but we do have, again, just invaluable assets. And so I'm really grateful for that experience. I definitely want to go back to Peru, but not before I honor this idea of body pond. And so, or honor this idea of body pond that has already been planted in me and stewarded by folks before. And so after that body pond experience in 2023, the next summer I went back to spend all of my winter break with grandma. And together she taught me so much. I'll just talk about that experience briefly because I hope we bring it up, in talking about the vetiver grass. So because I was so interested in political ecology, I was like, what is the political ecology of Antigua? What are the environmental challenges we're facing and how are they connected to our everyday lived experiences? So I reached out to the GUARD Center in Antigua and worked with June Jackson to meet with farmers, talk about some of their challenges. Because I study agroecology, I was able to offer some technical support and have like a mutual relationship. And one of the things that she told me about was the use of vetiver grass and how it's just emerging a lot more in the island. And Uncle Clement and my mom and I recently talked about vetiver grass and just how important it is in terms of its soil health benefits. But again, I love what Uncle Clement is saying. It's not just about the soil, it's about the ethos. It's about how we get there, back to our sense of self. And grandma knows that grass. She had it since she was a kid. And I hope I'm not taking up too much time, but I'll say this one thing. One thing I'll say. Grandma showed me how to weave. And I have a twin sister who is an amazing, talented artist. Me, I'm a thinker. I'm a researcher. I'm not very detailed oriented with my hands, but grandma sat there and was so patient in explaining to me, this is how you properly remove the spikes from the grass, and this is how you weave it. And I just remember looking over at her, taking this grass with me one by one because I wanted to make a yoga mat with the grass. And I realized, in weaving one leaf over the other, that's the dream with what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to weave my experiences from Body Pond, weave my experiences with sustainable agriculture in Carlisle, weave my childhood experiences with Body Pond into something that into something that I can call my own. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to weave technology of people who might be illiterate but have vast knowledge. And so how do we get these perspectives that aren't represented on paper? How do we get these perspectives to the forefront of the conversation? And so, yeah, my goal as now a researcher and a farmer and a young person is you have to be able to acknowledge when knowledge is in front of you. You have to be able to acknowledge when it's time to be the teacher and when it's time to be the student. And so I really look forward to learning more about how vetiver grass can be integrated into the actual landscape of Body Pond, but I think also the ethos of what weaving that grass can do is more important. And it's about weaving intergenerational perspectives across disciplines and reclaiming what was lost. So, yeah.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah, very, very.
That is powerful. Megan, we don't want to ignore our viewers. This would be a good time to acknowledge them, thank everyone for joining us, and see if we have any comments or questions.
Okay, so we have several viewers and we have some comments. So Martin Cave, he is a great supporter from the Chamber of Commerce. He says, sorry to join late, that's fine. We're just glad you're here. And Roberta Williams, she says, our ancestors were highly skilled from Africa, which is what I think you were saying, Clement, which is really good. And she also says, what an amazing experience. Didn't realize you shared your skills with Guard Center. She's speaking about you, Jen, because Roberta used to be in charge of the Guard Center some time ago. So that's what we have so far with our comments. So if you have any other comments, you can keep them coming. The one thing I wanted to say is, in tying all of this together, I mean, you know, we are a show that talks about finances and skills on how to enhance your financial wellness, your financial literacy. And just listening to both Clement and Genesis, I'm like taking what you're saying and just like implanting it on top of people who might be trying to determine what side hustle they might want to do, or how to manage their finances. And there's so many things that you can tie in. So speaking about looking back at our ancestors and what are the skills we ourselves have and how we can use them to do our side hustle, I find it to be very empowering to hear that our ancestors did it. So can we? They've done it before. We have the skills within us. And so I want to encourage all the entrepreneurs out there, learn from this. We have the skills right here. We can make the next best, whatever the thing is that you're working on, whether it's kombucha, whether it's jams, jellies, whatever it is. So
some kind of services.
All services, absolutely.
A lot of services out there.
I really hope that we can all be encouraged by these stories. Even look at Clement. You're sharing your stories. I'm pretty sure that there is some kind of service that can come out of this, whether it's tours or different activities that you do that will help from a financial point of view. I'm sure it's there. And Jen, I don't even have to talk about you. I know that there'll be lots of revenue streams from all the things that you have in the pipeline.
One thing I wanted to add really quickly, when Clement talked about sea, sun, and sand as a part of our tourism product, he and I have had preliminary conversations where I see this whole, what he's doing, and Jen's interest in how Body Pond can be perhaps positioned for community tourism. You know, bringing together the farming, bringing together the stories, the heritage, the culture, in a way that, you know, we can diversify what we already have. We have a strong product, but it's based on beach tourism. How do we get people, get our visitors to also look at our culture and our heritage in a very practical way? I mean, farming, as Jen would tell you, is huge. I mean, people travel for farming and farm experiences. So I think that too is very interesting. But Megan, let's get some pictures up here. We'd love to show people what Body Pond 2 looks like.
Okay, so let's start with the sign,
Yes.
Body Pond 2. Clement, you can, if there's anything you want to say about the pictures as I bring them up.
Where do the stones come from? Anything? Did the stones have any origin in Body Pond?
No, these stones don't have an origin in Body Pond. These white stones are mainly known from the north or east of the island.
Okay.
But the whole stonework stuff is something that I'm very interested in. I incorporate it as much in my gardening and in my landscaping. And I think, I must say that, Aaron and Stanford, when he was around, he sort of brought an awareness to this skill that was almost lost, and he revitalized it. And so I've used it um, all around my garden. But I do have, I don't know if you've got any pictures of that, but I do have some of the stones from Body Pond in other areas in my garden.
Yes, we're going to get there.
Okay, tell us about the copper. You're the copper man.
Yeah, I'm the copper man. So these are actually made out of cast iron. I'm not quite sure why we call them coppers, but locally they're called coppers, but they're actually made out of cast iron. And they were
Is
used
this
in
one from Body Pond?
No, I don't have any coppers from Body Pond.
Okay.
There's only one copper that I know came from Body Pond, and I think Auntie Sella has that one.
Okay.
A child trumps a grandchild.
Absolutely, every time.
Week. Yeah. Okay. But the coppers were mainly used in the sugar industry for boiling the sugar cane to get it to molasses and eventually into sugar. So of every estate in Antigua, where you see one of these sugar mills, would have had at least one. And they come in all different shapes. These are now considered to be antique pieces. And so there is a great desire for them. And I'm a little bit of a collector. I collect, I sell, I exchange, and this is one such piece. This particular piece is about 4 feet deep, and it's quite huge.
Okay. So tell us about these.
All right. So this is one of my 3 mango trees. It's an East Indian variety. I actually brought this mango tree in St. Lucia about 20 years ago, at a time when I had not been successful in getting any of my mango trees to grow. And I was determined. So I went about, learned from all the local people what I needed to do to get the mango tree to grow. And basically, I needed to establish, make it sure that it would establish before it would hit the marl soil. So I had to dig a 4 feet by 4 feet by 4 feet deep hole, fill it with topsoil, and rest is history. Huge tree. On the tree, I have to my left, I would have an orchid, looks like dendrobium, and then the strange tree in the strange plant in the middle is a staghorn fern. It's an epiphyte. It gets that name because if you sort of look at the shape of the leaves, it looks like the horns of
Yep.
a deer. So it's called staghorn fern. And below it, you see some stones, and these stones are all tombstones from a slave burial site in Body Pond. The one right in front of us, which is green, and a lot of the green stones came from Body Pond. There's a lot of green stone in the Body Pond area. And that one there, you can't see it here, but it actually has writing on the tombstone. And that person, her name was Priscilla. If you can get any of the other pictures where it's shown better, but she died in 1808. From our oral history, this was a slave burial site. And I think that finding that writing on the tombstone, it corroborates our oral history. I think you should have another picture, Megan. See if you there's another picture where
I know the picture you're speaking about, but I don't think
you
I
don't
have
have it. Okay, no problem. All right. Yeah, but persons can
This
probably
one also is part of the from the tombstones as well, the one we have up
Yes, yes.
now.
Oh, yeah, the one up. Yeah, all the tombstones that I have and all the stones around this tree are from that slave burial ground. It was damaged about 22 years ago, and
Mhm.
unfortunately, when I found out, I took my kids up there, told them the story of the slave burial ground, and let's say I incentivized them to let's try and find one that had some stuff, and it only cost me $100. But young kids, $100 is a lot,
Something
and
will change.
some things don't change. Yep, incentives there, and yeah, we actually found these pieces. So apart from me having them, my kids were with me when we actually found them. So I think it has great sentimental value to them.
Okay,
All right,
this one with
this
Sir Reg.
with Sir Reg. He was an avid gardener, or is an avid gardener. I mean, I think he's 92 this year. So he doesn't get around to doing much gardening. But again, a lot of his philosophy with gardening, using artifacts to bring out stories and that sort of thing, was something I picked up from him. He's donated a few pieces to me. So I went to visit him last week and, have some old talk. But he is, and I said, for those who don't know, he's the designer of the Antigua Barbuda flag, and he's also a sculptor. The piece on the right is one of his unfinished pieces. He was working on it a few years ago, and he got a stroke, and he was never able to finish it. So it was just there, sitting in his yard. And I went and asked him, what he wanted to do with it, and that I wouldn't mind display it up by me. And he graciously said, please do it, make him feel happy. And it's there. So again, this is a piece that's been by me over 20 years, but I've never told the story until my Ghanaian experience. So I'm telling the story now.
Okay, awesome.
Okay,
So
great.
those are all the pictures we have of Body Pond 2. Do we now
Right.
move over to Body Pond?
Yeah, move over to Body Pond. And while you're doing that, let me give Genesis an opportunity to talk about. Well, I know, Clem, you're having a walk through Body Pond on the 22nd.
Yeah,
Heritage
22nd
walk to kind of
22nd
point
of
out some of
February.
these things.
Nice.
But Jen, tell us again, you have more of a global perspective in terms of where this thing can go. Tell us about, what you see in the future for Body Pond in terms of how it can be developed from an economic standpoint. As I mentioned, maybe a pillar, supporting one of the new pillars in tourism. What do you see? I mean, you've gone as far, you've gone around the world. Tell us, what do you see in terms of the potential for Body Pond?
Well, I'll refer to Uncle Clement, and I mean, I'm a world traveler, but so is Uncle Clement, and I mean, he is really the brains of I mean, just has such a deep connection to the land. And for me, I wrote an agroecology proposal 3 years ago, or 2 years ago, where I got satellite data of what Body Pond looks like, and I started to map out where different plants could be. I interviewed Grandma about what Body Pond looked like, what she remembered it, what it tasted like and sounded like. And I'm interested in bringing back some of the biodiversity of Body Pond. I know that we struggle with fever grass being an issue just in terms of choking out some of the plants. But I mean, connecting it to the global conversation, I see a lot of potential with Body Pond just in terms of having more biodiversity, more butterflies. Again, it's going to take a lot of work, but I'm willing to do the work, and I'm more than willing to learn. And so if given the opportunity, I think that Body Pond can be what it was, if not what it was, something that young people can resonate with. And thinking about farming won't be a hesitation. They say, no, I know soil. I know how valuable it is. I want to taste this. I know how good mangoes taste when they're hard and they're picked from the trees. I want when I have children, I want them to feel proud of where they come from. And yeah, so all I'm doing is just carrying out a promise. When we talk about ancestors, I mean, I'm the living example of being nosy and curious and wanting to
Enough.
and everything that we really need, right? In terms of just carrying the needle just a little bit more forward. And so I know that that is happening everywhere. I'm in the process of working with Uncle Clement to talk to him and to Grandma about what body planning can look like. And from my perspective, with the experience I've gotten with environmental science and grant writing and organizing and research, I'm just doing my best to position body plan within a larger conversation about climate justice. And I think that we have a lot of potential to acquire funding and resources needed to make this a project. So that's mainly how I'm just offering my skills to get this going. So I hope that offers some insight. But yeah, let's keep this going. I'm excited to see what's
Awesome.
I think for me, what body pond represents, it represents our past. It showcases what our future could be, and it showcases what our future is if we don't do anything. Right? And I think we've got
For missed opportunities as well.
missed opportunities. It's missed opportunities. It's whatever. So I remember body pond when I was young. But when I was young was not the heyday of body pond. When I hear my parents speak of it, and we somehow get the impression, or it's a mistaken impression, that if we do nothing, everything will remain the same, right? And experience tells us that that does not happen. Look at Barbuda. There was Irma. Everything changed. Everything was wiped out. You'll remember, certainly Dorita and Megan will remember, one of our rituals on a Sunday was going to body pond every week. Dad would climb the coconut trees. We would cut coconuts. We would drink as much as we liked.
Oh, yeah.
And then we would take a few home. But nobody ever drank them when they got home because they weren't fresh. So most of them that we took home were to give them away. And if I were to say, or if my grandfather was alive today, and he were to realize that there was 100% decimation of those coconut trees, right?
Wow.
It would be unbelievable.
Yeah.
But
So true.
lethal yellowing did that. But that is not what I think is the greatest tragedy. The greatest tragedy is that no one has sought, and we've got to take the blame for this, to replant them. Right?
Yeah.
We certainly, as a generation, benefited from somebody having the foresight to do it. And I think what we've got to do is say, okay, look, we can make sure that we pass something on
To the next generation.
to the next generation.
Yeah.
Jen mentioned about the fever grass and the vetiver grass, and I want to make this point. Sometimes it's not every time that we have what we so-called see as progress. That is indeed progress. And the story that I remember my grandfather would always tell us.
But Clem, I want to stop you.
Sure.
Because you have a tour coming up. Two things. We're past 5 o'clock, so we're out of time.
Okay.
But the reality is you have a tour coming up.
Okay, so we don't want to give up.
So here's an opportunity for our viewers who are interested in learning more to join the tour. It's a free tour. Refreshments will be on sale. Products will be on sale. But I think we should probably leave, tie a bow around it and leave the prize for the actual walk that you have planned. So tell us very quickly what people can expect. What time? Where's the meeting point? What time are flyers being worked on?
Yeah, the meeting point.
Tell us what you can tell us.
Okay, the meeting time will be 6 a.m. sharp. Okay, and we are going to.
That's the meeting time or leaving time? Are you going to start?
We're going to start at
Okay,
6.
gotta make that
We're
point
starting at 6.
clear.
We're leaving at 6, right?
Sorry, the
Because
leaving time.
So people need to be there by 5:30.
5:30, right? And we're going to meet at the John Hughes playing field, which is
Okay.
actually located in Follies. And so that would be the old entrance to the body pond. There's a statue or is it a bust daddy or a plaque with
right in the corner.
Right at the corner.
Yes.
We're going to meet
So-
there.
Mhm.
Persons will be allowed to park along the main road, or there's a playing field right there if we have spillover. And we're going to go to the dam, the body pond dam, and see the waterways. We're going to see some of the fauna and plants that naturally go there. We're going to see the problems with the fever grass. I want to be able to show them the sugar mill. I'm hoping that we'll get enough time to visit where the old slave burial ground is, but that will depend on the fitness of persons, because that's hiking
Up a hill.
uphill.
Mhm.
So they have to wear comfortable shoes and
You
clothes.
gotta wear comfortable
That's important.
shoes. You gotta wear comfortable shoes.
Sunscreen.
All right, sunscreen.
And in a length of time, how long do you anticipate the
I put it this way,
tour to be?
Body Pond is a great place. I can spend the whole day, but I really would love by the latest 9 o'clock we're done.
Okay.
Because
Okay, so 3 hours.
yeah,
And they'll be-
so it's
they'll be
going to
back
be
to their cars.
sun is going to be coming out. Hopefully, if it's a great day, we're going to see all sorts of things. We are going to see.
Share your contact information for persons who want to register, because I'm sure
Yes.
you want to get a sense as to how many people.
Yeah, so basically, we've got an event on Facebook that you can go and sign up and say that you're going. So we get your numbers there, or you can contact me at 732-1201. Send me a WhatsApp or text message, or you can send me an email, and my email address is Clement, Clement, Samuel, Samuel, the number 81 at gmail.com. So that's Clement Samuel 81 at gmail.com.
Okay.
Awesome.
Well,
So we
one of
are
the-
over time.
We're over time. I just want to say really quickly, one of the fascinating things that I discovered later in life about Body Pond was that what's his name? Richard Taylor and Elizabeth
Richard Burton.
Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor. Well, I think Richard Burton owned the house at Body Pond, which is now owned by Rob Sherman. And so when I discovered that, my grandfather was still alive. He was up in age. And I said to him, I never knew that, that they actually lived in Body Pond. And I inquired whether he had ever met them. And he said, of course, he would take milk for them every day. And he talked about how beautiful and how nice Elizabeth Taylor was. And I don't know that story, that many people in Antigua even knew that Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton spent that much time in, of course, Papa didn't get into it, but he had sufficient connection with them. It sounds like they spent quite a bit of time in Antigua. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So you'll discover a lot of information about Body Pond that you didn't know on this walk. So everyone is encouraged to attend. Jen, any final thoughts?
No, just thank you so much for your time. And I can't wait to see what emerges from this. I love you all so much.
Yeah, love you too. Thanks
Great.
for your
Any final
contribution.
Because we're really over time.
I just would love to say to persons, look, let's get back to our roots. Let's get back to the land and let's learn our history. And there's no reason why the two are mutually exclusive. So gardening and history are part and parcel, part of each other. And I encourage you to join and to have the satisfaction that I've gotten over the last few years of making this my passion.
And we like to turn passion into profits. So
Absolutely.
and throw in
Absolutely.
finance part as well. Yeah. Awesome.
And I think
Awesome.
Jen made a really good point about the connection with the environment.
Yeah.
And in terms of our future, our environment will determine the kind of future that we have from all aspects.
Yeah,
Great.
thank you.
This has been good.
Yes, you're an
Thank you so
inspiration.
much, Clement. Thank you,
All right.
Jen.
Thanks for having me.
Well, any final thoughts or comments from our guests before we wrap it up? You want to acknowledge any final comments?
Just looking forward
You
to
know
seeing
what?
them come out on the February 22nd. And I can assure you that it will be a great tour, and you will learn some things and have some fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Roberta says that there have been many wonderful ideas for Body Pond over the years, but the biggest problem has been the lack of resources to maintain everything. That's true. But you know what? We have to find a way.
And
Where there's
whatever
a
we
will,
can do,
There's a
small
will.
steps.
where
Yeah.
there's a will, there's a way.
Bye, Likkle.
And there's also likely grant funding.
There you go.
Is what?
It's
Right,
like there's
exactly.
a good story and there's likely grant funding. So let's tell a good story.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
So,
Well, folks, it's been another wonderful
Okay, it's
edition
been
of Likkle
good.
Byte Ideas. We want to thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you found it to be enlightening, enriching, and engaging. We'll see you again pretty soon. We'll let you know. Don't forget to sign up for the Heritage Walk and continue to enjoy Black History Month and search within your families and your ancestry to see what stories you can find and what connections you have to your past. Enjoy your evening, and we'll see you again very soon.
Bye, everyone.